Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. We've got another interesting show for you this evening. Looks like Solon is not going to join Stephen and I. I think Stephen might even be staying in the background a little bit. Second hour with Frosty Wooldrige is kind of up in the air. I don't think I got a response back from him. Sometimes he forgets to come on to Skype anyway, and then I have to give him a call. And I'm also down here with my dog Wilson, who's a pretty old guy and had some trouble getting up the steps on the other side of the house where he usually comes in. So he had to come down here in the basement. And long story, I won't bore you with it, but he may or may not enjoy this show, and hopefully it won't be too disruptive. But well, we are back in the Billy Meier case, and I want to take you back to how it all began. Edward Albert Meier is an 81-year-old man. He lives in Switzerland in a tiny mountain village called Hinterschmidruti. Actually, Hinter means behind Schmidruti. Schmidruti is about 35 minutes east of Zurich, and you'd call it a tiny mountain village. It's nestled among the pine trees of northern Switzerland, also among the snow-covered mountains. And Billy now has written over 40 books, but I'd like to take you back to his early life, back to the 3rd of February, 1941, when Billy had just turned 4 years old. He was living at a place called Niederflachs, 1253 Niederflachs, which was a short distance from the town of Bulak, which was surrounded by the Eichen, Moser, and Bruder Mountains, as well as by wide forests and extensive meadows. And this was a mild night in May, and as a young boy, Billy woke up at about 3 a.m., crawled out a lower bedroom window, and sat down on a bench that his father had created. And he looked up at a beautiful starry sky, and he heard a voice in his head say that my life is made out of the love of creation. And a short time later, words formed on Billy's lips which said, "Since ancient times you had lived among the stars." And suddenly Billy knew who he was and what his mission on the earth was. And he also experienced something that he would later call impulses, which were impulses from the storage banks. And our planet has storage banks. Our solar system has storage banks. Our galaxy has storage banks. And our universe has storage banks. And everything that you've ever thought or done is stored in these storage banks in some kind of energetic form. And Billy had good memories that had penetrated him, and from earlier lifetimes. And he suddenly knew the way he should go in his life and what he had to do. And there's also this puzzling thing which Billy has written in one of his writings that I've always pondered and never really completely understood. He said, "Thus I suddenly knew what space and time signify concerning the evolution of human beings and all things." So there's another profound statement in the Meier material. They're all over the place, and you'll contemplate them for years because they have so much meaning. And I've just barely, within the past couple years, been able to scratch the surface on what some of these things mean. Billy then starts to talk about the love of creation. Remember, he's 4 years old, and he's having this epiphany, and he says, "I recognize that the light which the stars emitted was a light in the visible spectrum. However, that the light of true love remained invisible, creational, and for all great time. And he talked about the stars, and he saw the light which the stars emitted, but he realized that there was an invisible light he called the love of creation. And he had an unfamiliar longing for the vast distances and faraway worlds. But he started as a very, very young boy now to understand his mission on the earth. And he would say, everything which exists in the whole universe is a manifestation of the might and the infinite and true love of the creation. So what is the creation? You know, Billy, and the Meier information in general, has a different notion than our religions. Our religions talk about God the Father, or God the Holy Spirit, or about Mother Nature, you hear people talk about. But the Meier information says that the intelligence that created our universe it's a spiritual, energetic intelligence. It has no personality, and it's neither good nor evil. So it doesn't function like the term God, which is really an imaginary figure that our religion has created. I know that would be very offensive to many people. And it was also a bit of a confusion because in ancient times there were what you might call gods on the earth, or very evolved human beings. And there was a term in the Illyrian language called Ishwish, which I believe also was kind of captured by Judaism when they talked about the Tetragrammaton, or Yahweh, or the name of God that couldn't be uttered. Anyway, there's a very interesting book that Billy has called The Navel of Life, Omphal Murado, and he talks about a lot of this in it. I've gotten bits and pieces of kind of, translations of it, probably not the best translations that you could ever come across. And it says something to the effect that the gods of the earth were human, and they came from the depths of space, and they demanded sacrifice and worship. And this is kind of where our religions came from, according to the Meier information. So, but Billy knew at a very young age that everything that exists in the whole universe is a manifestation of the might and the infinite and true love of this universal consciousness. This universal consciousness, which has no personality and has a evolution which follows a fixed pattern. So our universe, we could call it a creation, is in its beginning stage. And a creation goes through what are called wake and sleep cycles. And for example, our universe is expanding. It's called the Dern universe, according to the Meier information. No pun intended there. DERN. It's 46 trillion years old. It has a sister universe called the Tao universe. That's the same age. And you've got these two universes that are adjacent to one another, and they're both in their expansion phase. And this expansion phase goes on for 155 trillion years. And during this time, the universal intelligence, the creation, creates human spirit forms as a part of its own evolution. So the human spirit form is designed to perfect itself over many, many lifetimes. And then eventually it merges back with creation and brings all of this knowledge that it's gained with it. So our universe is in one of its wake cycles. And a wake cycle is 155 trillion years. And when this expansion phase is done, our universe will start to contract. And its contraction phase will be 155 trillion years. So both expansion and contraction is a total of 311 trillion years, which is called a great time. And our universe will go through 7 of these sleep and wake cycles. And then it will become what's called an creation. An is it's a prefix in the German which refers to the most ancient kinds of things. Now, there is an creation over our creation, so to speak. This creation, our creation, when it had its Big Bang, that Big Bang was related to the idea of the creation. So, and eventually our creation will evolve into an creation. It goes through another stage, and there's this predetermined evolution that a universe goes through. And our universe, the intelligence behind it, is evolving. It is at its youngest phase right now. It's what it's called its swinging wave is at its weakest or youngest state. And a creation that's in its first stage of evolution has what's called a material belt. In the material belt, there are 7 belts in creation. The material belt is where all the stars and the galaxies reside. All the physical matter is in the material belt. Now, the material belt is vast. And our scientists, that's the only thing they're aware of, is the material belt. But there are 6 other belts involved in our universe beside the material belt. And there's something, for example, called the transformation belt, which I think is the 5th belt. I don't know if I have this right in front of me now. But the transformation belt is very interesting because it has something called chronons in it. And these chronons eventually become tachyons. And our terrestrial scientists will discover tachyons shortly. But so in the transformation belt, time begins to run into the past, which is so interesting. This is the 5th belt. And this is where aging originates. So this means that the transformation belt is where the chronons exist and aging starts to occur. And tachyons are representing the past. Okay? So the chronons age, become tachyons, and represent the past. So this whole idea of time is occurring in the transformation belt, in the 5th belt. Okay, the 4th belt is the solid state matter belt, where the galaxies and the comets and the planets and the suns are. And a negative energy comes into the material belt from the transformation belt, and it combines with a positive energy that comes from Earth space, or the 3rd belt. So these 2 energies coming together form matter. So, and this is a principle, it's one of the creational natural laws, and the Meier teaching is that the negative and the positive are 2 forces which belong together, and they should never be separated because they depend on one another. And this same principle holds true for your spiritual life. Don't ever try to remove the negative. Work with it. Be as neutral as possible in your relationship to the negative. Because the negative has a purpose in your life, just like the positives does. And your goal is to stay in what's called harmony, internal harmony, whether you're dealing with the negative or dealing with the positive. So I'm going to move and change subjects to reincarnation. It's something that we need to talk about, something that's real important to talk about. And I was talking about the storage banks earlier when I was talking about Billy's early life, and that how Billy could sense things from the storage banks. He could feel things coming out of the storage banks. Now, just so you have a little bit of a background understanding of this, Billy has what's called a spirit form, as do all human beings. And the spirit form is a fragment of this universal consciousness. So it's the part of you that never dies. So you could see yourself as being one with the universe, one with the universal consciousness, because the part of you that doesn't die is a fragment of this universal consciousness. Now, Billy's Geist form, as it's called in the German, is 9.6 billion years old. His spirit is the oldest spirit form in a physical body right now. And just to kind of give you the big picture real quick, there are 2 million highly developed societies in our Milky Way Galaxy, despite the fact that our scientists are wondering, is there life out there? There are 6 to 7 trillion human civilizations in our universe right now. So our universe creation is perfecting itself through the spirit forms of human beings, and we're gonna talk about reincarnation in just a moment here. So the spirit, human spirit, perfects itself and becomes one with creation. And there's something that we have that connects our conscious and subconscious mind, and it's called the sensor. And just keep that in mind. I just want to talk a little bit quickly about a few world circumstances, and then I'll get back to reincarnation. Our world is in a big financial trouble right now. And one of the reasons is, for example, we're burning 99.5 million barrels of oil a day. And this is causing a environmental destruction, but it's not going to last too much longer. And I had this epiphany this week. I lost a little sleep over it. Well, I think it's going to be within our lifetime when this all comes crumbling down. So there's a shadow government now which governs the U.S. If you ever watch the news, it's pure propaganda. If you go to CNN or MSNBC, it's pure propaganda. It makes me speechless. It's just ghastly. So there is a shadow government that governs the U.S. right now, and there is also a world shadow government. This world shadow government doesn't care about the environment. Our governments allow the creation of plastics, and the plastics are causing great environmental destruction. And I must warn you, as you learn more about the Meier information, you will also have a bigger burden on your consciousness, because you will be more aware of what happens or is going to happen in the future, just like Billy does. So Billy had to work very hard to bring his thoughts and feelings under control. And we know then the true problems of world overpopulation. And one of the big things that's going to continue to happen, and hopefully I can flag down Frosty, Wooldrige, for the second hour of the show, but there will be about 70 million refugees across the world, and more religion will be emphasized, and terrorism will occur all across the world, and the religions will continue to be hostile towards one another. And many young people will listen to those who preach hate. So there's going to be a very strange world that we see in front of us. It's already happening. People like Alex Jones have been banned off of YouTube. because the shadow government controls reality. Yeah, I don't know how long I'll be able to stay on the internet with the way things are continuing, but I want to move into reincarnation during this next section. Everything that we think is stored in what's called the planetary storage banks, and there's a unique frequency associated to the things in the storage bank. So if you have the ability, I don't have the ability that I'm aware of, maybe sometimes I do get information from these storage banks, but if your thinking is at the right frequency, you can pull things out of storage banks. There's other egos and consciousness forms that can be accessed if you are able to recreate the same frequency in your thinking. And there's also what's called the strudel, which is a storage bank archive for the spiritual teachings. The Meier information has spiritual teachings. There are also something called fluidal forces, which I don't think I'm going to talk about in detail today, but the fluidal forces are an influence on our consciousness. And the fluidal forces are electromagnetic vibrations that each person emits. And your thoughts, and the more powerful your thoughts, if you learn the secret to making your thoughts more powerful, these fluidal energies, these electromagnetic energies will be more and more absorbed into your clothing, your watches, the walls of your house. If you've been in the house for a while, it will absorb these energies. And I think this is a good thing, because you essentially have something like an amplifier or a mirror working if you stay with the same house for a long time. It's very disruptive to your whole spiritual life to be continually moving. And that's why these people that are these migrants, they're probably very, very disoriented. So also, cremation is bad because it destroys the skeleton. And your skeleton contains fluidal energies that come from your mind. And in your next lifetime, you'll be able to make a back connection to this personality through the fluidal energy. Somehow the fluidal energy has a memory of sorts. So, for example, your heart, your physical organ, the heart, it has huge amounts of fluidal energy in it. So people get these heart transplants, and then they start to think like the person who they got the heart from. And there have been cases, and Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about this as well, where people who have gotten hearts and heart transplants start to have nightmares, dreams about being killed. And in fact, the person who had the heart previously was killed. It's very, very interesting how these things come about. Okay. Now, one of the things that's happening, well, let me describe the normal reincarnation process, the normal cycle of reincarnation. I'm way behind my originally projected schedule here, but this can be a good thing usually. So what happens is 21 days after the spirit or the sperm fertilizes the egg, the spirit form comes in to the body of the embryo. It's only 21 days old. It's not even really, it's barely looks human at this stage, I believe. And it brings in the Geist form, the spirit form, the fragment, the tailstock of the universal consciousness comes into the body of this little embryo. And it brings with it all of the memories of the previous lifetimes. Now they're in the subconscious and they can't really be accessed. And all the consciousness forms of all the accumulated evolution of maybe millions of years, which is not that uncommon, come in also. And it's in the subconscious or it's in the spirit form. So we have two things. We have the spirit form, which is the spiritual consciousness. We have the material consciousness, which is the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the unconscious mind. Now, you come in as a child, even though the child doesn't know a language, it can't control, it can't even control when it goes to the bathroom, it can't walk. But in its subconscious and in its spirit form are all the accumulated wisdom of all the previous lifetimes. Now, and you have a personality that was developed for this particular life. Now, that's what happens normally. And then you learn to walk, you learn to talk, and you get these impulses from the spirit form, usually. But you can also get impulses from your own subconscious. And the more you learn proper introspection, the more you're able to listen to these impulses. Now, one of the very strong impulses that comes, in my humble opinion, are impulses to strive, and they're related to enthusiasm. Now, we're going to talk about this in our next section on creational natural laws, but I want to get into this just slightly. So, enthusiasm is very, very important. Enthusiasm. Let me read a little bit here from the Might of Thoughts about enthusiasm. Therefore, if with one's daily work an attitude is to prevail, through which the work is executed with joy, then corresponding enthusiasm must be created for it, which relives all the self-torment and aversion. Okay, so we do not want to have self-torment, disapproval, rejection, and so forth. So all work must be tackled and carried out with joy and enthusiasm. And if indifference and destructiveness are not to arise, so if you do not tackle your work with joy, you can have indifference and destructiveness. And this is very, very dangerous to your thoughts. I'm kind of really going off on a tangent here. Work is a legitimate necessity without which no evolution can occur. So this is one of the creational natural laws, and it's related to work. So it's called striving. Striving is the very nature of the human being. It's the law of all evolution. Without striving, there's no happiness. So work is a legitimate necessity without which no evolution can occur and no life can be maintained. So your work at your day job, whatever profession you're in, is part of your striving. Cleaning out your garage for your cats is part of your striving. Working out is part of your striving. Taking the garbage out, all the basic organizing your closet. Every single creature must execute its work, even if it is just the search for nourishment or nest building for the offspring. Again, this is one of the creational natural laws we're talking about. How much more than the human being must take on the responsibility of his or her work, if he or she wants to scrape a living and fulfill all his or her many wishes for prosperity and abundance in every regard. And how much better it indeed is to carry out arising with work with joy and enthusiasm itself. Now, there's another section here that I was hoping to talk about here, but okay. Enthusiasm must be a very great benefit to the human being. However, its absence means an absence of initiative. So, and I ponder about this whole enthusiasm thing is because one of the things, as I've said many, many times before, one of the things I tell myself constantly, and it comes straight from the book here, Might of Thoughts. I'm confident, I'm optimistic, I'm relaxed, I'm cheerful, I'm enthusiastic. So we're talking about enthusiasm right now. This is neutral positive thinking. If you're these things, you will harness the incredible power of your thoughts. So, and this is what I wanted to get to. Rather, as vigor, vibrancy, idealism, joy, enthusiasm for work, assiduousness, cheerfulness, elevatedness, and so forth. This is significantly important, and it must be imprinted into the consciousness. Now, what is this saying here? Enthusiasm must be imprinted into your consciousness like a stamp. Again, I'm learning this. This is new material for me. It's like a printing press, like a stamp. Enthusiasm. This is significantly important, and it must be imprinted into the consciousness because with its thoughts, the consciousness has very great significance for a successful life. If the consciousness cools off, indeed, in a form such that is neglected, then not only do the thoughts begin to work in an uneven and negative, as well as a negating form, and create a negative might. Rather, the personality which indeed comes forth from the actual consciousness also begins to quickly crumble. So, if you do not continue your striving, if you do not continue your enthusiasm, then everything you start to think in a negative way. It starts to bring negative circumstances into your life. Now, why do I bring this up in terms of reincarnation? Well, as the world continues to become more and more overpopulated, people will start to reincarnate too soon. So, only a very short time after death, people will start to reincarnate. Why is this bad? Because you don't have enough time in the spirit realm to process your past lives, to literally store what you've learned in your spirit form. This overpopulation disrupts the spirit realm as well as the physical realm. So what happens in as little as a half an hour? Spirit forms will start to reincarnate. So when a spirit form reincarnates after only half an hour, it may bring trauma with it from the previous lives. That's usually what people remember from a previous life, is the trauma. Such individuals have received strong impulses of remembrances of the earlier personality. And these people are the ones that tend to make world news as they share these details, which they have no way of otherwise that they would have known. And this kind of thing, I guess, could happen more and more. And this is because there's not enough time between reincarnations. Let me give you an example. A normal amount of time for reincarnations would be about 152 years. So if you lived 100 years, you would be 152 years in the spirit realm. Now that gives you some time, not only to learn and study everything that you did, everything that you were a success at, which those will be your consciousness forms that are stored in your spirit form, but you might have also an opportunity to learn from your failures. And another thing that happens in the spirit realm, it's like an energy band around our planet. And that's where the spirit form goes when it leaves the body after death. It goes into this energy band. And there's something called the overall consciousness block, which is a storage bank in the other world. And that's where all this processing takes place. And if you don't have enough time in the spirit realm, then you don't have enough time to process your whole previous life. So we need for a person that lives 100 years, they would need ideally 152 years. in the spirit realm. It's time and a half. So if you had 1,000-year lifetime, it would be 1,500 years before you would reincarnate. But this whole balance is thrown off. So when people come in now, they have a strong connection to their previous material existence. So this has all kinds of problems. So the comprehensive consciousness block does not have enough time to finish. That's that storage bank in the other world. Does not have enough time to finish dissolving the old personality or complete the new personality. So in a sense, this lack of time in the spirit realm keeps us connected to the old personality. So when we come into the new life, we have this connection to the old personality. The spirit form is forced to reincarnate too soon. So the new personality hasn't been completely programmed. So people that are being born right now in this time have great problems to live through in their new life. Some of the effects can be weakness, a non-thoroughness, and instability. These people have negatively affected interpersonal relations. The environment and the planet itself has issues. Many human beings will suffer because of this, because of handicaps, proneness to drug addiction, softness. So again, if a person lived 100 years, under ideal conditions, they would be in the spirit realm for 152 years. We now have these premature incarnations. There's not enough time in the spirit realm to program the next personality. This leads to instability in the personality. This makes people likely to be more addicted. These kind of people need more support from their parents. Sometimes the masculinity doesn't form correctly. It doesn't have enough time to form. And this is very, very bad news, and I apologize for this, but the masculinity of the personality doesn't have enough time to form, and the cycles, they say they never return to normal because too many spirit forms get activated on the planet. So there are currently 129 billion spirit forms. That's an unbelievable amount in the fine material realm around our planet. That means that these spirit forms would have had to be reincarnated at least once. So, I know that was a data dump of information. Let me try to summarize it again quickly. We have a spirit form. The spirit form never dies. It's a fragment of the universal consciousness. It's called the Geist form in the German. And it learns from each one of our material lives. And when we die, the spirit form takes with it the material consciousness to the spirit realm, which is the energy band around our planet. And that spirit, that material consciousness is processed. Everything that we learned is then stored in the spirit form. It's programmed in the subconscious. And we come back again for a new life 21 days after the sperm fertilizes the egg. This is a cycle that's been going on for millions and millions and millions of years on this planet. If you're the typical Earth human, you've probably incarnated about 4.5 million years as a human being. And right now, because of the tremendous overpopulation, what occurs in the material realm is affected because the spirit realm doesn't have enough time to process all the information from the previous life. Now next I wanted to talk about the creational natural laws a little bit, because one of these creational natural laws that I've been talking about is the law of reincarnation. And that is a law. You will reincarnate whether you want to or not. The Meier material says the planet you die on is the planet that you reincarnate on. Well, people will say, well, what about free will? What if I don't want to reincarnate on the earth? You have to remember, when your material consciousness is being dissolved and is being processed, the person you are now is not really existing. And your spirit is a fragment of the universal consciousness. Your spirit form is. So it's not going to be protesting. It does everything out of love. You see, that's the first creational natural law. It's the law of love. It's the highest form of love. It's called effective love. It's the love between a mother and a child, between friends. It's not romantic. It's not unstable. It's the kind of love that creation has. And in fact, creation radiates love. Love is the highest principle in all creation. And through it, everything exists in absolute logic. So love is very logical. The existence of everything is related to this love. If it were not for the love of creation, nothing would exist. Love is the highest principle in all creation. And I'm talking about a love that's based on respect, based on veneration, and based on the idea of live and help live. In other words, you're not a person that ignores a plant, an animal, or a person that needs help. You help when you can. And this is the law of love. And this is an effective love. This is a stable love. It says every tiny plant and every tiny animal fulfills its purpose in love. Love letter 27. Billy's written this, and very poetic and beautiful. One of the most beautiful and poetic things you'll ever read in your entire life is Love Letter 27. It says, the incredible splendor of nature is the visible expression of the love of creation. So when creation expresses itself, it's expressing its love, and it does it through its creations. The trees, the rivers, the sun, a sunset is an expression of the love of creation. A sunrise is the expression of the love of creation. So you get the notion that creation, not only does it creates these beautiful things as an expression of its love, but since these things are alive, like the trees, they grow, that means they're moving. So over time, you get a different unfolding of the expression of the love of creation. The sun rises, you see the sun move, you see the clouds part, you see the stream as it flows down the hill. This is creation in its expression of its love. That's the first creational natural law, love. So this is a much bigger love, has nothing to do with romance. That's a different kind of love. That's called affective love. It's very unstable. It can cause a lot of problems. We tend to get involved with it. It's not a bad thing. But the second law of nature, the creational natural law, is the law of striving. We talked about that a little bit earlier in relationship to enthusiasm. The law of striving is the fundamental law of all evolution. And your happiness depends on your willingness to strive. And striving creates your life. So as you strive in the very many different areas that you strive in, create for yourself kind of a wish dream with where you want to go, what you want to do, and then focus your confidence on that. So striving, it will create your life. So you're using your thoughts to create a wish dream, and then you go towards this life determination and you strive for it. If you don't do this, if you're unwilling to strive, then you'll experience affliction. You'll have an inhibited evolution, and if it gets real bad, you'll fall into hopelessness, grief, confusion. So don't get in this disharmonious state. Continue to strive. You can be creative with your striving. You can take breaks. Always look at your striving in terms of the law of harmony. The law of harmony says that you're thinking in a neutral, positive way. So as you're striving, if your internal harmony breaks down a little bit, ease up on your striving. Be flexible. Okay. Do not become irrational. Do not fall into disharmony. Everything positive, as well as everything negative in the end, is only dependent on how pronounced striving is in any life form. So the more you strive, the more happiness that you'll have. So depending on the degree of strength of the striving of any Vasen, it will assert itself in the world and prevail, or it will fall, shatter, waste away, and come to an end and vanish. And even when you die, there is striving in the other world, in the spirit realm, processing those memories. The spirit form absorbs information and it evolves. It goes up the evolutionary ladder. So, we talked about the law of love, the law of striving. We've touched on the law of harmony. And this is also related to the bipolar structure of everything. Remember when I was talking about creation? And the negative energies coming in to the material belt from the transformation belt, and the positive energies coming in from the third belt to the material belt. The third belt, I believe, is the earth creation belt. Literally, material comes from this law of harmony. You should think this way. In your subconscious, let me just give you a breakdown on the human subconsciousness. And I'll just continue to talk about these creational natural laws until the end of the hour here, and then we'll pick up in the next hour either with Frosty, Wooldrige, or the Giza intelligences. So, in your subconscious, you have programmed negative garbage, and it comes from our society. So people think thousands of negative thoughts a day. Analyze your own thinking. How many times have you felt negative within the past hour? You have these little fleeting thoughts of negativity. They produce negative feelings because your feelings grow out of your thoughts. So if you have negative feelings, look, introspect, and you probably had negative thinking, which produces negative feelings. But you want to have positive feelings, right? And this is the law of harmony. So we're constantly in introspection. So you have to negate the negative thought, neutralize it, where you're trying to get to neutral positive. So when the negative thought comes in, tell yourself you're confident, you're optimistic, you're relaxed, you're cheerful, you're enthusiastic, that you're the master of your own destiny, that you're the forger of your own fortune, that you are the creator of your own good luck, that you will continue to be your own master. You know, the one thing you don't want to do is succumb to these negative thoughts, because the negative thoughts will generate negative feelings, and these negative thoughts and negative feelings will start to bring negative circumstances into your life. So you want to learn first to control your thoughts, and the thoughts and the feelings, they go together. And when they work together, Billy calls it a deadly might. So if you can harness your thoughts, your good thoughts, and harness good feelings together, you can create tremendously positive circumstances in your life. So, what does Billy say? I do not allow my thoughts to drift. I steer my thoughts like a captain steers his ship. I strengthen my thoughts. I nurture my thoughts. I organize my thoughts. I clarify my thoughts. This is all the law of harmony. Billy has an entire book on it. It's called The Might of Thoughts, Macht der Gedanken. And I've studied it over and over and over again because I had some thinking issues I had to straighten up. I think a lot of times we don't even recognize our own thinking issues. They just happen again, and then they bother us again. What does Billy say here? Let me read this to you. It says, the might of the thoughts is always bound up with the corresponding feelings, which do indeed result from the world of thoughts. And in this combination, they form a deadly might. The fact is that the thoughts and feelings exert a monstrous might on the health of the human being, and not seldom even determine whether he lives or dies. So, you should be confident, optimistic, relaxed, cheerful and enthusiastic, and your life depends on it. Your health depends on it. So, we were talking about creational natural laws. I better not get off too much on the law of harmony. There's a whole book on it, and you'll continue to learn it for the rest of your life. I think I've got about 5 minutes to the top of the hour, and my producer is telling me to roll with it here. So actually, I may get interrupted at any moment. So just be prepared. There is also called the law of universal creation, and this is related again to the book, The Might of Thoughts. And it says that every thought is enlivened by might and power, and must as a cause also bring a quite certain effect. Okay, so when you have a thought, and it is enlivened by might and power, it is intense, you have feelings associated with it, they're neutral positive, you're absolutely certain that this thought is going to come to fruition, the effect of the thought is directly proportional to its might and power. So the more might and power that you have in your thinking, you will be able to do whatever it is you focus on. So this is the law of universal creation. So if you follow the law of love, the law of striving, the law of harmony, and the law of universal creation, then you will generally, your chances of prosperity and abundance are much, much higher. I mean, extremely high. So it really is within your own capacity to have plentiful abundance in your life. Now, we have certain difficulties that we're facing, like overpopulation, that are causing problems. See, we're not out of the woods. See, the Earth-like planets should be kept at about 500 million human population. And this is very, very critical. And we usually devote the whole last hour to the problem of overpopulation. We've had some really, really good shows with Frosty Wooldrige, who is our overpopulation expert. I haven't seen him come on tonight. So anyway, we may have to roll with things as they are. I've really enjoyed talking about overpopulation, and maybe we will start to go ahead and talk about that, because I think it's such a critical issue. We'll be back in about 5 minutes, folks. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. We're about to enter hour 2. We got Frosty Wooldrige on the line. Solaris Blue Raven has joined us, and I think my producer Stephen Woods is there. Frosty, I wasn't sure if I should call you or not, but I'm glad you could make it, man.
Oh, I really look forward to these discussions, and what an honor to be with Solaris. I'm delighted. We really need to have more women in this great discussion for this country, and she is an extraordinary voice in the United States. And so I'm delighted, and obviously always appreciate Stephen. And so, I'm excited. Part 7 today is America's immigration-driven overpopulation predicament. Endless population growth ensures the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So we'll kind of theme it at that for the next hour.
Okay, I wanted to throw a few concepts out that we talked about last time that I thought were so impressive. And one of the things, I believe it was, Frosty, that you told us that we have like 14,000 commercial airliners. And one of you guys, I think it was you, Frosty, put that link in. And you can go to this website, and I don't have it written down, but it's incredible. If you look at this, it's www.flightradar24.com, and it just shows thousands of aircraft everywhere. And it's incredible. We know we're burning 99.5 million barrels of oil a day. So one of the first things we're going to see break down is air traffic, correct?
Well, it's a race, and I really research this on your own if you care to. It's a race between water becoming so scarce that there's no way that we can fill the aquifers because there's not enough precipitation. There's no way that we can water all of the crops that need irrigation, and there's certainly no way to water these cities with the needs of water. The average American, I think, at this point uses 166 gallons of water a day. And we're about to add, in the next 10 years, 35 million more Americans, virtually all of it most of it by 90% of it by immigration, both legal and illegal. And so you have that race going on as to the air traffic, the energy consumption, and certainly the resource consumption. And it's going to be interesting to see which one of these intricate aspects of this country and the infrastructure break down first.
One of the things that I came to conclusion was this week, I forget what day it was, and I was watching another talk show, and they were talking about the corruption in our government. They were going back and forth, and they were showing how people are now being censored, like people like Alex Jones have been kicked off of YouTube, and other people. I'm trying to forget the guy, Michael Savage. Dr. Michael Savage has been booted off too.
Yeah,
so
they're getting close.
Tell us about that. Can you comment on that at all?
All right. One of the things that I have learned, especially with the media in this country, that it's controlled by the power elites, the mega money elites. It's powered and controlled by those in the positions to censor a Michael Savage. And certainly just about anybody else that speaks anything that has to do with the truth and the facts and what's really going on in this country. I don't know if you know this or you've ever heard about it. It's called silent assertion. Now, silent assertion is a term brought to us back in 1861 by Mark Twain, and the man was brilliant. I've read everything that Mark Twain has ever written. And one of the things he always said was when the United States Congress is in session, no man's property or life is safe.
My goodness.
And that's truly, this is what goes on. But one of the things he talked about was silent assertion, and I think it applies today up there in the higher echelons of the Congress. And there's no question, the Congress of the United States is mostly corrupt.
Yes.
And the reason that I can state that emphatically is because they are not taking care of the business of the people. They haven't for the last 30 years. They are literally corrupt to such a degree that it's systemic to the system. And what's boiling up underneath that is this silent assertion. And I'll give you the example that he had in 1861. And that was the northern states. They all knew that slavery was wrong. It was immoral. It was unethical. It was absolutely against the U.S. Constitution, where every person has inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, obviously, the slaves had no part of that, and that carried on because the only way to pass the U.S. Constitution, and I think it was in 1789, it finally got passed, and that was to still keep the slaves going in the southern states. But what it meant was the silent assertion was no one would step up and no one would speak out against the slavery and take any action against it. And so what happens is it boiled and boiled and boiled, and it was a cauldron. And finally, the Civil War erupted. And with that Civil War, you had 500,000, Americans killed. You had unbelievable destruction. You had horrible wounds and, oh my gosh, gangrene and infections and you name it. So silent assertion is now working very well today. It's working in Europe because they are being overloaded and overwhelmed by African and Middle Eastern immigration to such a point that it's destroying their cultures. The same thing is happening in Canada right now. And my brother Rex lives in Europe and has for 35 years. And he said civil war is coming because the Europeans, the people, like you saw fighting against Macron in the last month, they're starting to revolt. And the Germans are about to revolt against Merkel to such a degree that they're ready to kick out every immigrant that's ever come into the country. And so here in this United States of America, you've got those higher elites that are forcing down the throats of American citizens 1.7 million immigrants every year. That's both legal and illegal. They're doing nothing about it. They're doing nothing about the anchor babies. They're doing nothing about the visa overstays. They're doing nothing about literally stopping all legal immigration because it can't be sustained. And yet, because they own the media, whether it's Anderson Cooper, whether it's any of the people, Charles Schumer of New York, Nancy Pelosi of California, and I can go right down the list, they are not doing anything to serve the American people or American citizens. And so this silent assertion is going to boil up, and it's going to continue to boil up, and it's literally going to cause us to fracture both our ethos, certainly our language, and our way of life. And at some point, as I've said before, we will not be sustainable, and we will be driven down into the ranks of a third world country if we continue on this path.
Speaking of boiling up, I got a sense that Solaris is vibrating right now. Solaris, what do you think about?
Well, actually, Frosty, it's wonderful to hear your voice, and thank you for the nice, kind words. And I must say, I agree with you 100%. And it's interesting because I remember
Solaris? Hello?
And a lot of other things. Yeah, hi. Are you there?
It almost sounded like you got broke up.
It's funny. We're having interference problems. We're having some problems here over, I guess they're working on it with the internet. So, yeah.
Wow.
It's local. But yeah, I'm sorry about that. But anyways, I was mentioning how I had interviewed Frosty, and he predicted all of this years ago.
Yes,
he saw it coming, and we're spot on, Frosty. So I would say, it's interesting, but so disturbing right now. And what can we do, I guess, to stop this, to put a halt to it? I think President Trump's tried to do some reversals insofar as, keeping our borders more secure. But what is your take on what we need to be doing?
Well, in this forthcoming book, which will be the third, it'll be the trilogy, the first one being Immigration's Unarmed Invasion, Deadly Consequences, which was published 15 years ago. And then 7 years ago was America on the Brink, the next added 100 million Americans, talking about the complete population overload of our country driven by immigration, legal and illegal. And then this one, America's Overpopulation Predicament, Blindsiding Future Generations. What I have offered in each one of these books is that we must really encourage or even force a national discussion, debate on the carrying capacity of the United States, and certainly the ability to absorb these numbers. And of course, I call for, in this latest book, I used to call for only 100,000 immigrants legally per year, because that's how many people egress the country every year. And so we could then have a net gain of zero, a net zero gain, and then be stable. And I always have shared that the American woman has averaged 2 children or less per woman since 1970 on average. So we would have balanced out at 255 million people and became a very stable society and a sustainable one. But instead, we raced ahead and added about 100 million people by the year of 2006. We're now at 330 million, and we're headed for 440 million. All of it virtually driven by immigration and immigrants' children. And so we have to have a national discussion, and the national discussion has to get down to shut down all immigration, shut it down so that we have a chance. Even if we shut it down right now, because of population momentum, and even though we have only 2 children per woman on average in this country, we're still going to add somewhere around 40 million people, which is going to be a nightmare in itself. But adding 140 million, and we're already 30 million into that, we're going to add another 110 million. We're in such trouble that there will be no solutions. And so your voice, Mark's voice, Solon's voice, Stephen's voice, we have got to get more and more people who are willing to speak up and not sit back with silent assertion and hope it all works out, because it's not going to work out. And as I said, we're going to blindside future generations. If we think the airways of this country are crowded with planes right now, just think 10 years from now, we'll have 35 million more people. And of course, as I said, that 99.9 million barrels of oil every day will, again, within the next 10 years, go up to 200 million barrels of oil per day being burned. Because the Chinese will be burning, again, 98 million barrels on their own because of their prolific car additions and their population additions. And so we either do that and force and or elect representatives to go into the House, the U.S. House, and or the U.S. Senate and bring this issue to the forefront. And I'm willing to speak on Tucker Carlson, on Anderson Cooper, certainly on Jesse Waters, Martha McCollum. I'm willing to speak on 60 Minutes, on NPR. I'd love to I've tried to get on Steve Inskeep and Terry Gross. But again, those powerful media people are unbelievably, they are that silent assertion. Because Terry Gross has completely ignored me for 20 years. The same thing with Leanne Hansen, and when she was on, Robert Siegel at NPR won't touch this. 60 Minutes, I've contacted every one of them, and they won't touch it. The producers won't touch it. So you can see that there's powerful forces out there absolutely suppressing any discussion of where our civilization is headed. And where it's headed, as I've said, is over a demographic cliff. So it's going to mean that all of us, the American people, have listening to a program like this, getting the facts. And I absolutely wish, hope, and beseech anybody that's listening to this program and the series that Mark and I are doing, look up the facts, because all I'm presenting are facts. And of course, you'll hear all the different, well, that's racist. Oh, well, that's xenophobic. Oh, that's nativist. Or that's against the whole way of American life. No, what it is are facts. And some people say, well, this is fear-mongering. Facts are not fear-mongering. Facts are facts, and you either deal with them and you solve them, the problems that they cause, or you become the victim. And so that's my goal, is to create a national discussion and a national debate on where we're headed as a civilization, and let's change course. Let's move toward a sustainable, viable, thriving civilization rather than the one we're headed for.
Another guy you might try, Frosty. Have you guys ever heard of Jimmy Dore? He's a comedian, and he also has a kind of a talk show. He'd be another person. Have you ever heard of him?
I haven't heard of them, but I have just in the last week. I sent and I think I've sent you my press release. So it's got a little 3-minute TV video of me on NBC with Adam Schrager, and I just give a 3-minute. You can tell how well I speak and what I'm talking about, and how I present. And then I've got the points on that. Is the USA becoming overcrowded? I sent that to the top 10 cities and their top radio shows in those cities in the last week, and New York, Chicago, Miami, LA, San Francisco, Denver, and you name it, and all the radio shows and all of the top radio talk show hosts, and all the connections back to me and so forth. I got exactly 0 responses.
What?
I sent the same thing to. There was a big thing about Denver, Colorado, which has 2.5 million people, and it's headed to 5 million. 10,000 people move into Colorado every month, and over 1,000 move into into Denver. And I sent it to over 20 anchors and reporters at the Channel 7 News. There's Channel 7, Channel 9, there's Channel 2, and there's Channel 4. Not one single response.
My goodness. That's astonishing to me.
Yeah.
And what's the cause of the migration to Colorado? What is I know you and I are both in Colorado, or at least I am still. What is your impression of that? Why are they moving here?
Well, they're moving here because they're moving off the West Coast, which is absolutely 39 million people. And it's just a complete nightmare of traffic, gridlock traffic. It's a complete nightmare of underground economy. The schools are being trashed by all of the immigrants, both legal and illegal. The fact is that California is growing by 1,544 people a day. And their kids are destroying the school systems because there's over 100 languages. And as you know, here in Denver, Colorado, there's 173 different languages in Denver public schools, all because of immigration, and that our kids can't get educated. Well, that's what's happening mega because 98% of all that population growth in California is by legal and illegal immigrants. And they're literally completely trashing the schools. What I mean by that is that there's no discipline in the schools. There's no intellectual propensity for studying. There's no intellectual curiosity. These are immigrants, and these are people from cultures that don't have any value for education. That's just the reality. And so that's why you're seeing people flee all of California. You're seeing, if you've been on the East Coast, and I was just on the East Coast this year, it's a complete nightmare of traffic and air pollution and languages and linguistic chaos, cultural chaos, tribal chaos, and conflict. And so everybody is saying, well, where else can I go? You're also seeing population growth in Washington State and Oregon State, certainly in Idaho, and they're now moving up into Wyoming and certainly into Montana and North Dakota and South Dakota, just to get away from what the U.S. Congress is forcing on the American people. And this is unlimited immigration.
Right. Yeah, so true. It is an invasion. There's no doubt about it. This is a subtle. I don't even think it's a subtle invasion. It's truly an invasion. And to me, it's putting the American people in harm's way, as we've touched on that before. But also the biohazard aspects, insofar as people coming in with all kinds of illnesses and spreading disease. I think that's a huge deal. So I mean, there's so many things that we could talk about with it.
Oh yeah, and I talk about I've gone over the disease factors, whether it's Chagas or MDR tuberculosis, which kills 2 million people a year, and now the MDR strains that are coming in. And as you know, I'm a former medical tech, and I've certainly had my fingers in the medical area. And there's no question that whether they're bringing in tuberculosis or leprosy, which is Hansen's disease, dengue fever, certainly the new polio that's coming out of Africa, now manifesting in places like Minneapolis, where there's over 120,000 Somalis. And then you have all of these third world people and their personal hygiene or lack of it. This is starting to spread. But again, with a silent assertion, Is the CDC really explaining that we are under a tremendous threat by all of these diseases? And of course, again, somebody is suppressing that knowledge so that the American people don't know that there are 11 leprosy clinics now on the East Coast.
What?
Wow.
Before 1990, there were only 600 cases of leprosy in this country because we have such excellent hygiene and habits and so forth. Well, now there's over 11,000 cases of leprosy in this country. And you catch this stuff, that kid that's there at the McDonald's or any of the fast food joints, and he's got leprosy. Guess what? He's cutting your tomatoes up. He's cutting your onions up. He's handling your buns and the hamburger and the whole darn 9 yards. And we get to be victims of that. And so you're exactly correct. And we'll go on that chapter, and I'll dig into it further in the future, talks that we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like to have you back on my show too. I just want to say real quick, anytime, Frosty. Love to have you back on my radio show too. Yeah. Yeah,
I'm always available. The biggest thing is this: you get enough. It's called a tipping point. We have to move toward enough Americans have seen Roy Beck's 2 videos, Immigration, Gumballs, and Poverty, the 5-minute one that shows the massive load of 80 million new babies net gained by the third world every year, and they all want to come to America. And then the Immigration Off the Charts, the 10-minute one that shows what's going to happen to us as we jump from 330 million to 625 million in less than 80 years. The lifetime of a child born today. That's not a fun thing to see. And then when you start, and then I'm ready to at any time help everyone understand the underlying consequences of the fact that we're about to, in another 10 years from now, we will have 35 million more people in this country, virtually driven by immigration into this country.
It's insane. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's pretty much insane. And that's the tragedy of 535 congressional critters up there that are controlled by the power elites that want more production, more consumption, and more usage. And so they don't care, and they really don't care. People that are greedy for money, in other words, financial extremists, they could care less what happens. And again, as I've said in my travels around the world, no matter what country I've ever gone to on 6 continents, I discovered that the rich don't care, and as long as they are protected and up on the big high hill with a gated community, the misery, the poverty, the drug addiction, the alcoholics, the school's gone to hell in a handbasket, they don't care as long as they're on top of the pile.
Mm-hmm.
You guys were talking about California, and I just have to jump in and read this one little thing straight off Wikipedia. 2018 California wildfires. The 2018 wildfire season is the most destructive and deadly wildfire season on record in California, with a total of 8,527 fires. Now, is that not unbelievable?
Wow.
Yeah, well, again, in 2017, when I bicycled across America from Astoria, Oregon to Bar Harbor, Maine. In fact, my latest book just came out, Old Men Bicycling Across America. It's now on Amazon. It just came out this week. And it chronicles that ride, and it encourages baby boomers to get out there and live some epic moment by bicycling across the continent. Anyway, we bicycled through a 260,000 acre wildfire in Montana.
Could you
I've
feel
got
the
shots
heat?
of us.
Could you feel the heat literally on your bike?
Oh, right. We traveled through 2 days of fires. And then the last day, the fires shifted south, and it was black. I've got shots of the whole thing. We're going through the smoke for 6 solid hours, fire down to the road. Firefighters are sitting there, and they were going, "What the heck are these
crazy
bicyclists? A bunch of old gray-haired old men bicycling through this wildfire?" And we're just pumping the pedals and moving through. But we saw dead cow carcasses. We saw all sorts of animals that didn't make it through the fire. And it was 365 degrees of just charred landscape. And the cows that made it through it, they were bawling out trying to find, or they didn't know what to do because they didn't know how to get to the the water. They certainly
Jeez.
didn't have any more grass to eat, and it was a nightmare. But the same thing with California. I mean, as I bicycled down the coast of California this summer, the wildfires were all over the place. In fact, I saw some of the roads on Highway 1 and 101 that were consumed by the fire, and just a month or so before, I had ridden my bicycle on that same route on Highway 101 and 1. And it's like, whoa, I was just there. I mean, honest to gosh, I saw it just perfectly. So, and what I think about a total of 11 or 14,000 homes were destroyed. Well, again, one of the things that most people don't realize is when Mother Nature does what she does, the more humans on the planet, the more humans are going to die, because overpopulation is one of the great causes of all these deaths. Where if there was less people, there wouldn't be all these deaths from all of this compaction of these humans in all these different places.
One of the things that hit me this week is that I think in the next few decades, we're going to see the beginning of the collapse of our civilization, or sooner. What do you think?
I don't know exactly the timeline.
Right.
But there's no question, if we continue on this path that we're on right now, this civilization absolutely guaranteed 100% will collapse. Whether it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or 30 or 40 or 50, there's no way to sustain exponential growth. It is the growth of a cancer cell, and at some point, the cancer cells completely overwhelm the host body. In other words, North America, overwhelm the water systems, overwhelm the food systems, overwhelm the environmental systems, overwhelm the resource systems, and certainly the energy systems, and the whole thing starts collapsing, without a doubt. No question about it.
That's one of the things I think when you study this enough, you come to the conclusion that that's inescapable. It absolutely has to happen, because there's no way we can continue to burn 99.5 million barrels of oil a day, and you're saying it's going to go up to 200 million?
That's correct, within the next 11 years. That's correct.
I can't even conceive of that. It's beyond
my wildness. I know, but you have to understand, China is doing the same thing that America did times 10 speed-wise. They're putting 27 million new cars on the highways every single year. 27 million new cars. So let's just take another 12 years from now times 27 million more cars per year. I mean, just do the math. And then they're adding somewhere between 8 and 10 million people every year, because even with one child per family, it's called population momentum. So many mothers are having one child that they're on course to go from the current 1.4 billion to 1.5 billion by 2050.
And a lot of these cultures don't even have toilets, right?
Oh, yeah, of course not. As I said, 60% of India. Now, India has 1.25 billion people. And the Indian Express, and I researched the heck out of it, they're quoted, there's only 60% of the Indian people on the Indian continent, subcontinent there, do not have toilets. They don't have access to a toilet. So all of that urine and all that feces goes into the ground, into the woods, into the rivers, into the lakes, into everything. That's why the same thing in the 1.1 billion in Africa. Everyone defecates onto the land, and when the defecation dries, and then the winds come up, it's all swept into the rivers and is swept into the lakes. That's why Peace Corps workers never, ever drink any water in those areas. Same thing really in South America, unfortunately. We always had water filters, and everything was water filtered and treated as it was. And I got, when I was in Asia, I got sick. Oh my God, I don't mind telling you. And then when I was in South America for 6 weeks, I literally, I don't even want to tell you, it was pretty ugly. But you get into those countries, there's just no fresh water.
Did you drink?
And the foods are so contaminated.
Did you drink some of the bad water or something?
No, even with that, but I had to eat food, and I got caught up for 6 weeks. I got some kind of a bacterium in my stomach out of Cusco when I hiked the Inca Trail, And I literally, I was hitting the bathroom 8 times a day, and it's either the bathroom 8 times a day, and or my head was in the lavatory, and I was puking my guts out. Same thing when I was in Asia and China and India, literally sitting on the toilet with my head in the lavatory, and lost incredible amounts of weight, and weak as I could be. I really understand why there's so much death and misery in the misery index that is what has happened to all the poverty in the world. And again, 4 million children starve to death every year, and 8 million adults. That's all. You can look it up. That's the average. The United Nations will tell you that. That's 12 million people dying really unpleasant deaths. And I know that from firsthand because I have had my guts my guts turned into something like a clothes dryer, except it never shuts off, and everything inside my guts was just churning the whole time for just literally weeks on end.
We are so lucky in this country. People just don't realize it.
Nope.
Stephen, you've been pretty quiet. Are you still there? Are you on mute?
I'm on mute, yeah.
Did you have anything to add?
I'm just listening in, yeah. Taking it all in.
It's just totally amazing. Now, you're in Michigan, right?
I am, yeah.
Are you seeing any of this immigration yet? Or you're kind of away from the big cities, though, right?
Yeah, I'm in the country, kind of, so I'm a little bit far removed from that. But
okay. Well, that's very, very good. Frosty, one of the things I think we need to start doing is being able to somehow cooperate with some of these other countries. And I don't know what the answer is, but if they don't solve their problems, it's just everyone's going to continue to try to immigrate into the United States. And they need to solve their own problems, right?
Well, as a matter of fact, the Dalai Lama said that last fall, around September, said that all these immigrants need to go back to their own countries and rebuild their own countries. And of course, this chapter is called Endless Population Growth Ensures the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And this is the lead quote on this. And this book is loaded with these major quotes that are so compelling. The Green Revolution arrived as a result of the efforts of Norman Borlaug, and who, while accepting the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970, said, and I quote, "The Green Revolution has won a temporary success in man's war against hunger and deprivation. It has given humanity a breathing space. If fully implemented, the revolution can provide sufficient food for sustenance during the next 3 decades. But the frightening power of human reproduction must also be curbed. Otherwise, the success of the Green Revolution will be ephemeral only," unquote. Well, guess what? We're way past those 3 decades. And as a matter of fact, even though he created the Green Revolution and more bushels per acre and all the things that go with it, unfortunately, that caused this extraordinary human growth. And again, we jumped from 3.5 billion on the planet. We're now at 7.6 billion. We added 4.1 billion with no end in sight, as we're on course to add another 3 billion by 2050, which is only essentially 31 years from now. And nobody's talking about it. I mean, nobody is talking. There's not one single world leader talking about it. There's one U.S. Senator, Tom Cotton from Arkansas, who introduced a bill to cut all immigration in half. So cut it down to less than 500,000 per year into the United States. But even that wouldn't solve it. And so what I would love to see is a national, international conference with all the top environmentalists, all the top scientists, certainly all the catastrophic climate destabilization people, and have a huge conference and say, hey, all of the people of the world, and we're the leaders of all the people of the world, we have got to get down to a harsh reality. If the human race is going to make it through the 21st century, along with all the rest of the animals, which are also taking it on the air here with the 6th extinction session, we've got to get some kind of voluntary or, I don't know how, mandated or advertisement, 1 child per woman worldwide.
Yeah.
That really is the only thing that's going to solve this thing. because we're not going to make it through another 3 billion more additional humans on this planet. And the animals, and E.O. Wilson, the great biologist who's still alive from Harvard, he said we could very well lose a third of all species on the planet within the next 31 years.
You know, somehow we've got to talk to these third world countries. That's what we've got to do.
We got to talk to America.
Yeah. That's so true, too.
Yeah.
I mean, what's going on in Venezuela? Isn't Venezuela in a crisis right now?
It's in a total collapse. You know, I've been in, I've been to Caracas. I spent a year in South America, and I started right there. And they, unfortunately, they're so overpopulated, but they're also out of their carrying capacity. But they also either got usurped or voted in socialists, and everybody started riding the freebie wagon, if you will. And once you start riding the wagon instead of contributing to pulling it, that system will collapse. And so they have collapsed. They are collapsing. I think 1 million people have left and gone into Colombia. Then they show on the news at night all these poor women with all their starving children.
Right.
That is a factor of, again, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
And that's what your book's all about, right?
Yeah, what I do, I take all of these very cogent quotes by the top people in all these outstanding arenas, and I use these quotes to head up every chapter. Then I support each one of these quotes. And when you go through all of the research, here's poverty in America right now. In 2011, there were 46.2 million Americans in poverty. That's, living below the poverty line. They can't even make enough money to survive.
Jeez.
Then 2011, there were 9.5 million families that were in poverty. In 2011, there were 26.5 million people aged 18 to 64 in poverty. In 2011, there's 16.1 million children under the age of 18 were in poverty. In 2011, 3.6 million seniors over 65 and older were living in poverty.
Jeez.
And at the same time, we're bringing in 100,000 immigrants each month and putting them on the welfare rolls to the tune of, at this point, there's 44 million people on food stamps in this country. And here's another one, food insecurity and very low food security. In 2011, 50.1 million Americans lived in food insecure households, 33.5 million adults and 16.7 million children. So if anybody's got a problem, it's the United States of America, and it's going to continue to get worse as we keep importing all these people, and they have no ability to serve or function in this first world country, and they're all on welfare, and that simply at some point will collapse our systems.
I remember in your book you mentioned in your other book that 4 million people die on the street in India.
Yeah, that was in India. And as a matter of fact, Gandhi's great-grandson actually came to Denver here, and I listened to him. But that number, that was 10 years ago. 4 million people are born in the streets, live in the streets, and die in the streets of India without ever having taken a shower or used a toilet and or had a lavatory. They simply are street rats. But that same situation is not only there, but it's in Mexico. If anybody listening has traveled in Mexico, other than all of the tourist traps, just go to the outside of Mexico City. There's 20 million people there, but about 2 million of them are living in cardboard shacks, and they defecate with the chickens outside their little shack every morning and every night. It's unbelievable to see it in person, and I've seen it in person.
And our NFL players, like some of these guys are getting paid like $170 million a year and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, they're getting tens of millions of dollars. Yeah, it's unbelievable the kind of money these people are making.
I know, playing a game.
And they're playing a game that has no function other than entertainment. It's not furthering humanity or doing anything whatsoever. It's just a bunch of people knocking heads every Sunday.
It's like the Ultimate Fighting Championships.
Yeah, that's right.
That company sold for $4 billion. and now it has a new owner. But can you imagine how much money we're putting into nonsense?
I could go on and on about that. I mean, when you look at what's going, the ironies of this country.
It's such irony, isn't it?
Oh,
it's so absurd. It's so absurd. Think about it. How much did we? Oh goodness! Somebody told me. I think I'm trying to remember here. Didn't we sell $200 or $300 billion worth of arms to Saudi Arabia?
all the time. We're the second largest arms dealer in the world.
My goodness. So we made what, $200 or $300 billion on sales of arms, but people are starving. People don't have homes. We're destroying the environment.
Yep.
California's on fire. What is wrong with us?
That is the $64 million question. In the last 50 years of my life, to watch all of this go on, I do not understand. And I used to think, because I'm son of a United States Marine, and I used to think that the United States of America was infallible, and I thought the Congress and all the Congress and senators and all the generals everything was on the up and up. But having gone into the Army as an Army officer myself, I got to see the other side of that, and I got to see the reality of it. The Vietnam War was a banker's war, and it got 58,272 kids killed because somebody was making a lot of money, not to save the Vietnamese, not to save anything from communism. It was just being drawn out to 10 solid years, and it put 350,000 in the hot with all the maimed bodies and the screwed up minds and all the unbelievable battle scars, and we now call it this battle syndrome. What is it called? I forget.
Well, don't we also
PTSD?
have PTSD? Yeah. What about all the military bases? Don't we have like 7,000 military bases?
We have 700 military bases with 450,000 military personnel in 80 countries.
My God.
And they're costing us multiple billions of dollars. But there's somebody in Congress that thinks that we have to have our influence all over the world when it's doing absolutely nothing for world peace. It's doing nothing. I mean, how would we like to have 50 countries have all their bases in our country?
Oh, I know. It'd be insane.
That's how absurd it is. But then again, look at the power elites that are keeping the war going on for 17 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. Somebody is forcing that to occur, and they're selling it to the American people and all the senators and House that it's actually doing something to protect our freedoms, when it's absolutely doing nothing to protect our freedoms. And in fact, it keeps the Muslims over in those Middle Eastern countries so angry and so vehemently want to get revenge on us. I mean, I would imagine in 2019 we're going to see more terrorist attacks here in the United States, and certainly in Europe, and even in Australia, and certainly in Canada, because this particular ideology is an eye for an eye, and they are quite good at it. So we're going to see more of like Paris, France, and Nice, France, and we're more Oklahoma. We're going to see Fort Lauderdale. We're going to see Garland, Texas. We're going to see San Bernardino. We're going to see some more really nasty stuff, because we are imposing our will on people that don't want us in their countries, and yet that continues. And here's Mattis. He resigned as the chief of staff, I think, or whatever he was. Oh, defense. He was the chief of defense,
right?
Secretary of Defense, because we're going to draw out of Syria. We should have all of our forces completely out of all of those countries, because we're not doing anything except causing deaths of people, and we're imposing our will on other countries, and it's morally, ethically, and every other which way wrong, and it's just insane. But that's what we do, and we've been doing it for 50 years now, since World War II.
Now, is France in collapse right now? Pretty much.
They're in a lot of trouble. the French are so sick of all the immigration. They're seeing. I mean, Paris has been turned into a giant Muslim caliphate. There's 90 no-go zones where French police do not dare tread because they will be shot. Over New Year's, they expect anywhere from 500 to 1,000 cars to be torched by the Muslims.
Wow.
And they're doing the same thing in Malmo and Stockholm, and they're doing the same thing in places like Oslo. Oslo's now 36% Muslim, and they're just running all the Norwegians completely out of the city. How do I know? Because my brother lives there.
Wow.
So I've got a firsthand knowledge of what's actually going on over there.
So are we kind of seeing Europe starting to descend into civil war?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My brother. I just got an email from my brother. I probably could read it to you if I could pick it up here, but
go ahead.
Yeah, he just said it's moving towards civil war. Yeah, that's what's happening.
That's totally crazy.
Yeah.
It's and the news is absurd. We get strange, nothing, meaningless. This is better. I learn more on this show than I do here in the news. You know what I mean?
Well, again, because I'm not a part of silent assertion. I'm just a ground level journalist who's traveled. This year I traveled through 13 states. I've been all over the country. No, I traveled not only 13 states on a bicycle, but then I traveled all over Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Oklahoma. Yeah, I've been all over the country, about 20 states this summer. And as I go, I talk to people. And so I know what's going on. Whereas you get stuff from a guy like David Muir, or you get one from Jeff Glor, you get one from Anderson Cooper. They don't know what's going on. They got a whole different mindset, and they live in luxury apartments up in the middle of New York City there, or out in California, and they don't report on what's really going on here. Again, silent assertion is being fed into the American people.
You know what's interesting? Trump is not perfect, but he's made into the villain. You know what I'm saying? When the big deal, I mean, really, it's the whole freaking government that's screwed up.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. The one thing that, Trump is just quite a vociferous individual, and he's certainly a personality to be dealt with. But what he's doing is literally trying to save the American public from this immigration invasion. But notice all of the people that are against him. And he was voted into office to get the wall up, to stop the drugs from coming in, and stop the schools from being inundated by all of these illegal immigrant children, the jackpot babies, the anchor babies, and that start bringing some semblance to the immigration. And guess what? Even while he had the House and the Senate in his control, there are many forces out there making sure that he does not succeed. That's why he hasn't succeeded.
Stephen, can you drive the conversation for just a minute? Are you still here, Stephen? Solaris, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Can you drive the conversation for a minute? I got to take care of a few things here. Hang on.
That's fine. You know what I was thinking, Frosty? This is all by design, obviously. This isn't an accident. This whole orchestration of basically defeating the United States through this type of a system, the reset. You know what I was looking at is the possibility of space exploration, and the only way out is up insofar as a solution would be to live off planet. And what is your take on not the black space fleet, but the new space program that's coming in insofar as populations on other planets as a solution?
Well, that's a nice fantasy because, first of all, just to get to one livable planet would be an impossibility because there's no such thing as warp drive because there's no way to keep all the bodies inside the Starship Enterprise from being melding with the titanium hull. So in reality, we're not going into outer space to save ourselves. We might have spaceships that land on, Mars or even the moon, but there's no sustainability there. It's called carrying capacity, and so it's a beautiful. I love Star Trek, and I love Next Generation Star Trek, and James T. Kirk and Patrick Stewart and all the rest of them. God bless them all. But we've got to solve all the problems here on this very livable planet, and we better do it, very quickly, or we are going to be living on a planet that is not going to sustain all of us. And I can see, and I think Einstein said it before he died. He said, they said, well, what do you think about the next war? And thanks. And he said, well, I don't know about the next war, but the fourth world war will be done with sticks and stones.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely it is.
Solaris, you brought up something really interesting, too, because it's more of this strange irony that we have going on. We're paying our sports people $100 million, $150 million in some cases. And then I'm really interested in space travel, too. But when I hear Elon Musk talking about going to Mars, and I think of the disaster that's going on the Earth, I get this disconnect. Frosty, what about you?
Well, that is the disconnect, and I wish it was, when I was in Antarctica, there was Schimmel was his name, and he was a fantastic artist that was down there at McMurdo Station where I was working and playing and exploring all of Antarctica. And he made a beautiful painting down there, and it was cosmic, but it was animals, and it was all the penguins, and it was the seals, the leopard seals, and all that went with it. And he said, with species like humans, even the stars aren't safe.
It's just so weird. I mean, we have so much. It's just when I see the media and I see what is in the news is a complete ignoring the real problems that we can look around and see all these disasters, and they're ignored intentionally.
Yeah, they're ignored totally. Again, you've got 90,000 people living in tents and blue tarps there in Los Angeles. How do I know? I saw them myself last summer. I bicycled past them. I've got dozens of pictures. 11,000 homeless there in San Francisco. There's probably 6,000 to 7,000 homeless living under the viaducts there in Seattle, Washington. How do I know? Because I was just there. And are we doing anything about that? Are we getting suitable housing? Are we getting suitable job training? Are we doing feeding them and giving them dignity with a decent paying job? Are we working toward getting the Chicago and the projects where 7 out of 10 African American children are born out of wedlock and living with their mother and on welfare? Are we doing anything to change that paradigm? Chicago South Side, and I was born in North Chicago, so I have some affinity to that. And that is the fact that we're having, over the Christmas weekend holiday, it was 42 gunfights and 11 people died in Chicago. Are we doing anything to stop that? Yeah, that was just reported. I just came over my transom.
42 people?
We're not.
42 people in gunfights in Chicago.
Yeah, there's 42. Yeah, it's right on my transom here.
Unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
That's there was Wild West or something.
Oh, yeah. So they're just killing each other. It's just a shootout all the time.
And that's and they have total gun control there too, right?
Oh, and they have a completely total gun control. But they also have one of the largest illegal alien populations in the country, is in Chicago.
Thank you, Frosty. It's always a great time, man.
Okay, we'll do it again next week.
All right.
Thank you.
Solaris, thank you.
Bye, everybody. Yeah, happy Anima Show. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Happy
Bye.
New